we'll start our Sunday school with a song, hymn number 73. My God is a righteous God. Jesus knows my every word and deed. Jesus longs to meet my deepest need. He lives now to intercede. He will surely stand by me. My God is a righteous God. My God is a holy God. My God is a faithful God. He will surely stand by me. Jesus' love has drawn my heart to him. Jesus' blood has washed away my sin. His word makes me pure within. He will surely stand by me. My God is a righteous God. My God is a holy God. My God is a faithful God. He will surely stand by me. Christ has saved me from sin penalty. Christ will keep me for eternity. He guides through life's stormy sea. He will surely stand by me. My God is a righteous God. My God is a holy God. My God is a faithful God. He will surely stand by me. Let's have a word of prayer before we begin our thing. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to come into your house this morning. We just pray that you'll help us as we teach from your word, Lord. And we just pray that you have your will and way in every life, Lord. Just pray you'd bless in the service to follow, Lord, and that you'll just bring in those that you would have to be here to hear your word, Lord. We just thank you for everything you do. In Jesus' name, amen. You may be seated. Well, I got notified yesterday that somebody needed a stand-in, so you get me today. All right. Back in 2019, there was a Gallup poll, and it was asking what people believed about creation or evolution. And 40%, they said, of the respondents said that they ascribe to a strictly creationist view of human origins and believing that God created them in their present form within roughly the last 10,000 years. And, you know, you can agree with that. That's good, you know. I don't know about the 10,000 years, but here's the problem, though. However, more Americans continue to think that humans evolved over millions of years, either with God's guidance, 33% of them said that, increasingly without God's involvement, 22%. So if you look at those two numbers, 33% and 22%, that's 52, if I count correctly, 55%. Well, it said 40%, so there's a problem there. It doesn't compute really, because it's saying that of those 40% that believe in creationism, they also believe in what is called theistic evolution. In other words, God got it started and then it evolved. Well, no, we're going to look at that. It's just not so. You either believe one or the other. God did it and did it all, or he did not, you know. So if you just turn with me to Genesis chapter 1, we're going to start there and look at what God said about creation. In Genesis chapter 1, and starting in verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Notice there is no explanation. It is. It's stated as a fact because that's what it is. In verse 2, and the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, I don't know if you've noticed there's another, not only the miracle of creation there going on, but kind of another miracle in the sense that he created light and darkness and morning and evening without a sun and without a moon, because that's not created until down the way, which we'll get to. So you got to think about that. He was already controlling night and day before there was a moon and stars. Then we go on in what else was created there. Heaven, earth, water, day, night, evening, and morning, all created in that first day. In day 2, we're going to see some more things added. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning were the second day. And firmament generally refers to heaven, because he said that he called it heaven. And you can say the heavens is what we look up and see, or you can say that there is the heaven where God abides, which is sometimes referred to in some literature as the third heaven. And I think even Paul mentioned that he was caught up, and so that is the abode of God. But when he was talking here, he's saying that the heaven as in something above the earth, that we can look up and see. Then, so that was day 2, firmament and heaven. Day 3, we see some more stuff added, and that is verse 9, and God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. So by that indication, water covered the whole earth, because there was no dry land. So initially it was a big ball of water over everything else. So as an afterthought on that, who says that he couldn't have caused a great flood that covered the whole earth, because it started out that way, very wet. In verse 10 it says, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit, whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. So we saw oceans, seas, dry land, called earth by God himself, grass, herbs and seeds, fruit trees that bared their own, seeds that could reproduce themselves, that's a miraculous thing in itself when you look at what a seed can do, replicate, into a big tree or, bush, or a good old tomato plant, so you can have your BLTs. Good stuff. All right, and we continue on, and God said in verse 14, God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and he made the stars also. So now we see the creation of the sun and the moon. And yet there was day and night before then. And it continues on, it says in verse 18, and to rule the day and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, God saw that it was good. And the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So on the 4th day you had the sun and the moon and the stars given so that they would have light upon the earth, which was already there, but he divided it. Now in verse 20 we go into day 5, and God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creature that hath life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after his kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And the evening and the morning were the fifth day. So basically the oceans were populated and all the birds were created on the fifth day. So we had fish, whales, fowl, every living creature that moveth, all created on the fifth day. And then we go in verse 24, it says, And God so let the earth bring forth the living creature after his kind, cattle, and creeping thing, and beast of the earth after his kind, and it was so. And God made the beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind, and God saw that it was good. And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the living thing that moveth upon the earth. And God said, Behold, I have given you every herb bearing seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of a tree yielding seed, to you shall it be for meat, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to every thing that creepeth upon the earth wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat. And it was so. And God saw that everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. So on the sixth day, we find cattle and creeping things upon the earth, everything but the birds. The birds were created on day 5, but now all the rest of the land mammals and man was all created on the sixth day. And I will bring your attention back to a particular word that a lot of people misinterpret that want to do the theistic evolution. And that was in, let's see, when he commanded them to replenish the earth. Let's see, that was in, in verse 28. And the problem that I have there is a lot of people, the modern definition of the word replenish is to fill again. So what they'll do is that there was a teaching back in the day that was called the gap theory, where God created the thing and basically it evolved after that. So it's theistic evolution being done there, and we're saying that, there was some pre-chaotic earth, and that's where they put the dinosaurs and all that kind of stuff, and they infer that God destroyed that and then started over again. No, I don't think so, because here's the problem. The word replenish, as it was used in the time that the Bible was translated into English, did not mean to fill again. It is one of its sub-meanings, but it means to fill, not to refill again. And the reason why you can say that is re, a prefix in a lot of words that means to do again. There is no word in the English language called plenish, so it's not a prefix. So therefore the word is replenish, as in to fill. So he told man to fill the earth. He didn't say do it again. But there are people that will say, well, he told him to do it again. No, not so. So when you go into chapter 2, it also says that on the seventh day God rested, and that's where we get our 7-day week. And we in the New Testament, we do our worship on the first day of the week, as was done by the apostles. But what you see here is God very distinctly puts it that he created everything, he did not explain himself. It's basically put forth just like when we get saved, we have to believe it or we don't. Here it is, believe it or don't. Well, of course, there's a lot of them that want to, do a little bit, they want to stand on both sides of the fence. They want to say, well, there's God, but he let it evolve. No. And so that's not very good, Now, what I've got here is that I got 25 questions that you can ask somebody if you're dealing with them, and this is what I really want to get into. If you're talking to somebody that says they believe in evolution, because it's a thing. I mean, it's being taught in schools. Kids are being taught that, and it's a religion. I mean, really, it is a religion, because it takes more faith to believe in that than to believe the Bible, because there's just too many things that don't make any sense, just to put it simply. But they'll always talk about evolution as being true. We just got back from a trip recently, and we went all over out in the West, and we saw the Grand Canyon and the layers, and they like to say that the oldest layer is the oldest stuff and that it's millions of years old. I mean, every state park or national park, they have little diagrams, and they say this was this many billions of years old. No, it's not. But I mean, they miss the obvious that all those layers had to have been set down very quickly, because they will claim that it was millions of years between layers. But if that were true, you would find erosion between the layers, but they're very distinct. Sediment. If you take a bunch of dirt and you put it into a jar and you shake it up and let it set, you can actually see sediment layers form. Whatever's the heaviest goes to the bottom, and then you'll see different, striations in the layers, because different materials. Well, same thing. You have a worldwide flood. I mean, it cut through that, mud and stuff that settled and left the Grand Canyon. Another thing that somebody pointed out that I read recently, the Grand Canyon, if you look at the terrain, the river would have had been flowing uphill to make that canyon. Well, that doesn't work. So that means that it didn't form by the river. At that time it was because the water was above that level and cut it, not because the river that's there now cut it. But that's another thing. So, first question that you can say, has evolution ever been observed? See, because science, you can recreate things, you can verify it by looking at it. There's got to be some evidence, in other words. So that's the first question you can say. Evolution, has there ever been observed? So macroevolution is what they like to call that. One thing turns into another thing. You've probably all seen the little thing where people came from the primordial soup, and then it branches out into fish and birds and becomes humans. Well, there has never been anywhere where they can show you that one kind turned into another. You cannot do it, And there's enough, if you do some study on it, you'll find that even the evolutionists will say they can't find it. And I'll bring some of that up later as we have time. But next question. What assumptions are being made when someone asserts that evolution is true? I mean, they're making assumptions. I mean, right off the bat. So if you ask them, what assumptions are you making? You're assuming that the world is old. You're assuming that the worlds came from somewhere, but that's one thing I always found when somebody told me they believe that. I said, where did the universe come from? I'll ask them that. So where did the universe? Oh, the Big Bang. Wait a minute. Where did the Big Bang come from? Oh, all these gases. Oh, wait a minute. Where did all the gases come from? How do you create something from nothing? They'll say, well, it created itself. Can't happen, because to create itself, it has to be there. And if it's there, It didn't create itself. So those are things that you can push back, don't just, accept it, Number 3, are you aware of any observable evidence for evolution that doesn't require faith? There's your thing. See, we believe in God by faith, but they are taking things by faith themselves, because, the majority of the people that believe evolution are not even scientists. It's just, they've just been taught that from a young age, that, oh, we came from monkeys or whatever. But, they're taking it by faith. They are. So there's a thing that you can ask. All right. Are there any examples showing when non-life started life? A non-life form, life from a non-life form contradiction is contradiction of the law, I mean, basically we have, thermodynamics, and they say that, I believe the second law of thermodynamics says all matter goes from compound to simple. Say you lose energy. And a good example, I would say, if you were going to say that evolution were true or could evolve, if I took a Model T and put it out on a parking lot, and over time it slowly developed a V8 engine, and then it finally grew wings and it flew away because it became alive, that would be evolution. But it doesn't happen that way, because that second law of thermodynamics says all matter goes from compound to simple. So under natural events, sitting out there on the parking lot in the sun, it's going to rust and return to what it started as, iron oxide. It's going to rust away and it'll be gone. But yet they want to assume that things got more complex by what happened, what's happening right now, and it just doesn't happen. It always gets less. You lose stuff. And I kind of hit on number 5 already, of how did life originate? They can't answer that. They can give you a bunch of things that they think. They always talk about the primordial soup, that we, all this stuff was here, but they don't ever answer where that stuff comes from. How did it appear? And I saw this mathematician did an equation, saying if you took a world that was full of every amino acid that they know of, and put it there under the environment we have now, but I mean, it was just truly a world of the primordial soup. He said it would never, under the natural things that you see going on now, it would never form into an amino acid chain at all. It just wouldn't happen. I mean, it's an astronomical number, against the odds, and anything, I think, 1 to the 10 to the negative 40th above that is considered statistically impossible. Well, it's way above that, and I mean, that's just one simple amino acid string, one, and the human life is just full of amino acids, and they're very complex chains, very complex. How did DNA code originate? There's another one that's a very interesting study, DNA. I mean, the guys that actually discovered DNA were evolutionists, and they tried to use it to say, hey, this is evolution. But the more they've learned about it, they realize, at least everybody else did, I don't know if they ever came back to change their ideas about it, that how can DNA have evolved? It's so complex. I mean, it is basically a machine language, and if you printed it out, they said, you could probably have a stack of pages 200 feet tall, and that's in every cell. I mean, it's the building blocks to build a human, all right there in a little package. I mean, tiny package. You can't see with the naked eye, So how would that evolve, They say billions, and, they claim the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, at least the last time they readjusted it. you couldn't get that in trillions of years, you know? It just does not happen. You don't get complex from non-complex without an author, you know? You don't get computer programming without a programmer, you know? And that's what you got there. God was the architect of it all. All right, living things that looked like they were designed, so how do evolutionists know that they were not designed? I mean, they looked like they were designed, so why couldn't you say they're designed? But they like to put down that, you know, that they evolved. But think about this. There are many species of animals and insects and birds that are interdependent on each other. I mean, without the one, the other one wouldn't survive. So is that a design, or did that happen by accident, you know? Well, I would say it has to be a design. Take, for instance, there's a hummingbird down in South America that has a beak about that long. Well, it only goes to flowers that are really deep, and that flower is only pollinated by that one bird. So which came first, the bird or the flower? Well, if the flower came first, the bird could not have changed its beak to do that without dying first, you know, because it starved to death, you know? You know, it just wouldn't work, you know? And the flower didn't get pollinated, so it didn't reproduce. So not a, you know, you have to look at everything. They all are amazing because of the creation of God. All of it was designed. Very, very, very nice. Let's see. And number 9, if the evolution theory is true, shouldn't most fossils show transitional forms or features? This is one they can't answer. Even Darwin, in his book, in 2 different publications of the Darwin book, he stated that because he believed in, you know, evolution, he was one that wrote the book, you know, you might say, and but he said that we should, as we're, you know, digging in the ground, we should find all of these transitional forms. 2 times, 2 different years that the book was published, he said that. But he says, also stated in there, but we don't find them. So he was kind of saying that his postulation of the theory was wrong, but he said it in his own book, you know. And even to this day, there was a guy recently that published a book. He was the head of the British Museum of Natural History. He wrote a book on evolution, and somebody wrote him a letter and said, why didn't you put any transitional forms in your book? And the guy actually answered him and said, because I don't have any. He even realized that there were no transitional forms. And now they've got this, they tried to address that problem. I saw this morning when I was looking at stuff. They tried to address that problem, and now one group came up with this rapid evolution thing that they tried to explain it away, is that the reason why we don't see transitional forms is because it was a rapid change to the next form, and only those complete forms got fossilized. Just an excuse, you know, because they couldn't answer where the transitional forms were. But that's what I'm saying. You can see that it's kind of hard to believe that stuff. But yet they do, because they don't want to retain God in their knowledge. Let's see, I'm going to jump through a few of these. Number 11, how do living fossils like horseshoe crabs remain unchanged or over supposed hundreds of millions of years if evolution has changed worms into humans? You know, there's a lot of different things they call living fossils, like in this example, the horseshoe crab, because they find them in those low layers that they say is really, really old, and they're fossilized. and they find them in the next layer, they find them in different layers. So they say, well, they've always been around, so they're living fossils. But if everybody else changed, why didn't they? You know, why didn't they evolve? One of those, why didn't they change in the same time frame that everything else did? And there's other things where I've seen where they're supposed carbon dating, where they carbon dated some kind of clam and said it was millions of years old, but it was alive. You know, there's one of the things, carbon dating and their radio dating stuff has flaws in it because it makes many assumptions. Because if you're trying to decide how long something has been dead, and you're using the half-life of carbon-14, for example, you don't know how much was in there originally. So you're making a very big assumption. Was it full of it, and now you're at half, so it's that many years old? Or did it only have a little bit in the beginning? And I think that if you'll notice, if you look at some of the dating that they do, anything what we call pre-flood has very little carbon-14. But I think that during the breakup of the Great Deep and the volcanic action that happened during the flood, that's where all that carbon-14 came from, and then the animals afterward ingested that in higher amounts. And so as you go back to about 4,000 years ago, you get this higher concentration of carbon-14 in their cells. But then as you get closer to our time, it's faded off. But if you go before the flood, they don't look too old. Kind of an interesting stuff. This is really a big one that we always say, how did blind processes create mind and intelligence? How did it create meaning, altruism, or morality? How could that form from mindlessness? You know, I mean, it just doesn't happen. That takes God to do that, to give us those, to give us intelligence. What is the mechanism for getting new complexity, such as new vital organs? How can a caterpillar turn into a butterfly? I mean, they can't really explain that, you know, how it does that. And one of my favorites of the butterfly is the monarch butterfly. I mean, it not only turns from a caterpillar into the little pupa state, you know, and then transitions into a butterfly, but they actually start down in Mexico in a certain valley. They fly into South Texas and across the South. They reproduce. Then those offspring fly all the way up into Canada and all over the United States. They reproduce. Then those fly all the way back to Mexico in one flight. And then they winter there, they reproduce, and it starts the chain over again. So how do they do that, you know? I mean, it's not, you know, the same ones that went up here, or to the first step, that come back here. It's like 3 generations. And you know, how do they know where to go? But that's design. It's in their DNA because it was put there by Almighty God. All right, just kind of like that, what specific evolutionary changes generated complex or complicated organs such as the eye? I mean, the eye is an amazing thing, you know. Not only the mechanism of the eye, but then how does it interpret in the brain? And I mean, you can just go into so much about what the eye can do and how important it is. That's one thing we don't want to lose, you know, our vision, you know. Yeah, very important. But they can't really tell you how that happened, you know, because they don't have an answer, because evolution doesn't answer it. Here's one that I thought was very interesting. Bacterial flagellum, they call it. Some bacteria have this little whip-like tail on them. And it's very interesting because bacteria is very tiny. I mean, very tiny. They actually filmed this on electron microscope, and I've seen the video of it. But that little thing will whip around there, and it is basically, and they looked inside the bacteria, there is a motor in there. I mean, it has parts. It actually has a bushings in there, it has a drive shaft, a switch regulator, a universal joint, a helical propeller, that's that little whip, and a rotary promoter for self-assembly. It can reproduce itself. And the engine can operate at 6,000 to 17,000 RPM. That's how fast it can spin that thing. It's a living motor, but it's the same parts that you basically see in electrical, motor. But here's the thing, its energy conversion rate is near 100%. I mean, it's just a miracle. That little tiny thing. And it was kind of nifty to see it in the video, driving itself around. It moves around. Very complex, but just to give you a example of how small it is, 30 nanometers. It's small. And I kind of asked this one earlier, in another thing, but where did space for the universe come from? Where'd it come from? It's funny how that every time they just put up that new space telescope, and they keep finding more and more stuff out there. The farther they look, the more stuff they see. God's amazing, but it didn't happen by accident. And it can't be as old as they say. You know why? Unless you add energy to something, all the laws of the universe say everything deteriorates. So if you have so much, helium or hydrogen, I should say, in the sun, over time they will burn out. And I'm not saying God didn't create some in that state. I think He did. Because it was all for man to look at and go, well, there is a God, or to deny Him, one or the other. And that's what I think the problem is men, they want to excuse their ignorance of God. They want to find their own way. Here's another one. Where did the laws of the universe come from? Gravity, inertia, does that happen by accident? No. How did matter get so perfectly organized? I mean, you think about that. This Earth is sitting exactly where it needs to be in relation to the sun, and they refer to that as the Goldilocks zone, to where you can have life. It gets the right amount of sun, it's not too hot, it's not too cold. And there's just so many things they're having to assume happened by accident, to where it's astronomical, all the things that they have to believe to get here, and that doesn't even account for life, But if the Earth was as old as they say it was, the core would be cold already. Therefore, everybody would be dead, But one thing they've noticed with sending the little, Voyager and that kind of stuff out, that some of these other planets out there are hot, even though they're in a cold zone. They're still hot in the core, so can't be very old. Since all humanity observes some form of societal laws, and most laws revolve around the same themes, like no murder or adultery are allowed, and since all known laws come from a personal lawgiver, how does evolution explain universal laws without that lawgiver? Why do we have a conscience? Why do we do right as a general rule? Why do we feel that we have to do that? Is everybody scared about, the law, taking them to jail? Obviously not. There are some people that commit crimes, but as an overall rule, people do follow those norms. But where did they get that from? Why do you feel guilty if you do something wrong, Granted, I know the Lord says you can sear your conscience and do things wrong anyway, but at some time, you feel it. So, the only way to explain that is God gave that. If we came from mere chemical accidents, why should we feel compelled to behave in a particular fashion? You know? And, I mean, that wouldn't have done it. Why don't we, still act like animals do? They do what they do because that's the way they're supposed to. They kill to eat, they do this, and to create their own kind. That's all they do. But we're different, totally different. Man is different. Here's another one. If we evolved, they always talk about vestigial appendages or structures, well, where are they? They used to say that that we had different things that we didn't need, tonsils used to be taken out because they didn't understand what they were there for, but they have learned since then that that's why people don't get them taken out unless there's a problem. But they used to do it all the time. There were other items I can't remember at the moment, but many things that they put out there that say, this evolved or that evolved. It's just amazing to me that they come up with this stuff. If laws of morality are just the adopted social custom, then why was it that Hitler was wrong? Laws of nature make sense in the Christian worldview. God upholds the entire universe by his power. God is beyond time and has promised to uphold the future as he has in the past. So, God was the creator of those laws. And therefore, because of that, you can say, well, he was wrong because he murdered all these people. How does the material brain have access to these immaterial laws? How do we, fathom these and know that they're right, Pretty amazing stuff. Somebody else postulated a couple of questions that he uses when he was talking to evolutionists, this scientist, and he said, what caused the universe to come into existence, and where did the original energy or matter come from? That was his question. That's what he would ask an evolutionist. And it's on evolution foundation theory that he's attacking him at. He's saying, how did this happen? And he says there's only 3 possible responses to that answer. The universe created itself, which I mentioned, and the universe has always existed. Those are the 2 that they could be. And 3, the universe had to be created, which limitations the first 2 options and leaves the third as the only viable choice, creation, because the earth, it couldn't create itself. And here's how he explained that: the universe, if they say the universe created itself, for something, as I mentioned, to create itself, it would have to both exist and to have the power to act, and not exist to be created at the same time. It's a logical contradiction. And we know that from nothing, nothing comes. Therefore, this is not a legitimate response. Therefore, a person arguing this way has violated the form of non-contradiction. That's just a speech thing. You can't contradict yourself. And they're ignoring good science, because science is something you can prove. Now you're down to 2 possibilities, and that response to the universe has always existed and had no beginning. But this is a violation, as I mentioned, of the laws of thermodynamics. That we can do that with heat. Let's take an example, a car. If somebody gave you a brand new car, all expenses paid, you know, and you can have this thing for the rest of your life, but they only gave you one tank of gas and you're not allowed to fill it up. You know, when you run out of gas, it's done. And it just becomes an ornament. Well, the universe is the same way. There's nothing out there putting more energy into the universe. At least nobody's been able to prove that, you know. They know that that it's expanding, getting farther apart, but that's entropy is going to take over. That's one of the laws, you know, that it's going to finally come to a stop because it's going to run out of energy. And so you don't get it. You don't get any. It just won't last. It may outlast us, but it's not going to last. Basically, there's only so much space in there. Even though it's vast, there's only so much energy in that space. And then we get down to response 3 to that guy's original question. The universe had to be created, since the universe could not create itself and it had to have a beginning. The only logical solution is that the universe had to be created. This leaves us with the original question to the evolutionists: where did the matter come from to create the universe? And he replied, not recognizing that the universe was created ignores the laws of science and logic. That was his conclusion of the matter. If you ignore that, you know, you're not being scientific. His second question was, how could non-living chemicals give rise to living cells when the probability of a simple protein arising by chance is statistically impossible? I kind of hit on this a little bit, but it just doesn't, you know, I'll read what they said. It says, they calculated that probability of an amino acid naturally forming into a protein was 4.9 times 10 to the negative 191st. That's, and according to probability, 1 times 10 to the negative 50th means that it's statistically impossible. So, big numbers. Big numbers. I can't say that I understand those. And somebody else went further and said their calculation was that it would be 1 times 10 to the negative 40,000th for one protein to happen by accident, which means it didn't happen. But here's the answer. Colossians 1:16, for by him were all things created that are in heaven and that are in earth, visible and invisible, whether they be thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created by him and for him. God created it all. So we just have to remember that God is the one that's in control and has taken care of it. But remember, 2 Peter 3:3 says, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers walking after their own lusts. And that's really what it comes down to. They do not want to retain God in their knowledge, and they'll come up with their own thing. 2 Timothy 4:3 says, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears. And to conclude the matter, I'll say Titus 3:10 says, a man that is a heretic after the first and second admonition reject. Didn't tell us not to talk to them, but if they don't want to listen after 2 times, there's, as they say, more fish to catch elsewhere. Somebody else might talk to them later again. I mean, that's up to the Lord who's going to be saved, you know, if they'll turn. But you did your job if you go and talk and tell them about the Lord Jesus Christ. But it does tell us really there that we should be talking. So we should have some answers as to why we believe what we believe. But if you take some of these questions that we're asked and use them to turn it around on them. So show them that you've thought about it, you know, and that it just cannot happen by accident, and show them that they're putting more faith into bogus science because it's not true science. I mean, when it was first put out there, it was a theory. And for years and years, it was the theory of this or that. Now, every time you turn around, you watch any kind of PBS show that talks about, they'll just say millions of years ago. They don't even say it's a theory. They just blanket, throw it in your face. It's old, it's this, and billions of years. So, in concluding, glory to God, He created it all. Thank you.